adventure, possibly historical because they're pirates, but it's fantasy. You're welcome. Hello there and welcome back to my channel. My name is Mackenzie and thank you so much for being here. Today we are doing another mood and releases because April is tomorrow and it's time to get going on what I'm going to be planning on reading and also what I'm excited that is coming out this month. The mood for April is life and death. I kind of decided on this mood or theme when I was doing my Choose My Next Read With Me video, and I kind of decided on this feeling of like death or creepiness, a little bit of Halloween-y vibes, but also cyclical and beginnings and endings, and I was really just kind of engrossed in that idea. I had a few picks in my hand at the time, and those are probably the ones I'm going to be starting with as well, but the overarching theme being life and death, darkness, cyclical. Something in me is craving autumn and that feeling of the decay that's happening, but also this new era of life. Something in me wants that time right now. So that's what we're going to be focusing on reading, and hopefully it'll bring some sort of peace into my inner being. We can only hope. Now, releases for April. I only have a few to discuss, but I'm really excited about the ones that I am going to discuss. Alright, the first book I want to talk about is coming out on April 6th, and it is called Pride and Premeditation. This is a YA retelling, mystery, historical fiction kind of novel. So it is a Pride and Prejudice. I almost forgot what the original book was called. It's a Pride and Prejudice retelling, which I realized I do like those, and I do like retellings, so retelling of Pride and Prejudice, let's go. It's also a murder mystery, and apparently Miss Elizabeth Bennet has to solve, she doesn't have to, but she's gonna solve this murder case of a murdered elite person. There was a scandalous murder in London and Lizzie feels like she's the only one to solve it, but Mr. Darcy keeps getting in the way. And like, this isn't exactly a retelling like how Pride by E.B. Zaboy was, but it feels more like Pride and Prejudice and Zombies, where it's like the real story is there, but we're also talking about some strange things that might also be happening at the same time. And to be fair, I did like Pride and Prejudice and Zombies, so I feel like this has like good vibes written all over it for me. Next up, on April 13th, there are two books coming out. The Light of the Midnight Stars by Rena Rossner. So this one is an adult story, historical fiction with some fantasy mixed in. Rabbi Isaac and his three daughters are the most magically gifted in the Hungarian woods, and then when they offer their help to a stranger, this whole witch hunt begins, and they have to leave their home area and community and go and travel off to find safety. So I really liked this idea of Jewish folklore. There's also LGBT going on with witchcraft, and also it's a traveling story of running away from a home that you thought was safe and trying to find a better life somewhere else, and I do love stories like that. Also, it seems like it is going to be a complete different perspective than one that I'm used to, it being told from more of a Jewish folklore kind of perspective, and then focusing on a family dynamic where there's siblings but also a parent involved. I'm wondering how that's going to affect it. Near the Bone by Christina Henry. So this is an adult horror thriller kind of fantasy novel, and it's also written by Christina Henry, who wrote, I don't even know if you can see them, but they're over here, Alice and Lost Boy, and I love those books. Those are retellings, but this is not. This is a new mystery thriller kind of novel, and I'm very excited for it. I want to see what Christina Henry can do with her own plot, basically, without it being a retelling. So this book is about Maddie, and she has always lived with William alone in the mountains, and there's nothing to fear, there's no one out there, but William is like angry, and she has to fear hear his anger. And then strangers come to the door and she realizes that this is really going to upset William. It feels like it's one of those books where the reader is going to be left in mystery and in the dark for most of it, and then only at the end is everything going to make sense. And I love stories like that. I love when it's purposeful. I love when it's done well. I want to see, like I said, I want to see what Christina Henry can do with something that isn't a retelling. I want to see how well she can write her own story. April 15th holds one book that I'm very excited for, Sister Song. This is an LGBT female-led story that kind of reminds me of Greek mythology about three sisters, one who's transmasculine, and they stand as the last bastion against invading Saxons. And so in order to save their area, community, country, they are going to take fate into their own hands. And the premise kind of seems sort of simple, but it's more about the characters that I'm excited for, them being kind of more interesting and seeing how these sister relationships develop, and especially how these three sisters are going to live their life in this world that is very obviously male-led. I love to see stories like that. Alright, April 20th has the most books that I'm excited for coming out on that day. The first one is In Deep Waters by F.T. Lukens. Oh my gosh, when I saw the cover of this book, that's all I needed. I knew everything that I needed to know. This is a YA fantasy romance adventure, possibly historical because they're pirates, but it's fantasy. You're welcome. A young prince is going off on his, he just, came of age, and so he's going on this tour to tour the world, and he runs into this mysterious stranger who is possibly a pirate and definitely linked to some sort of fantasy magic, and that stranger is the only person who can possibly save him when the prince gets kidnapped. Ah! I love Pirates of the Caribbean, and this is just a gay Pirates of the Caribbean, and it's all I need in my life. We're just gonna move on because that's all I need to tell you. Witches Steeped in Gold by Cianon Smart. I have heard about this book for probably a year now. I watched Fictional Fates, Joel at Fictional Fates, read and do a review of this book, and he loved it, and I'm very excited for it. This is a Jamaican-inspired YA fantasy, paranormal story, and we're excited for it. Anything with witches, and on top of that, it's Jamaican inspired. I love it. So in this, we have two enemy witches who are divided by the order and united by vengeance. They enter into a deadly alliance in order to survive some sort of twisted cat and mouse game that's going on. So not only do they have to escape whatever their coven is doing to them, they also have to rely on each other. And I'm here for it. The Forest of Stolen Girls by June Her. So this is also a YA historical mystery. So Juani and her sister went missing, only to be found days later next to a gruesome crime scene. And then 13 years later, more girls start going missing in the same kind of weird circumstances. So Juani's father, who is a police officer, goes back and starts investigating the mysterious missings of the 13 new girls, and then he goes missing, and so Juani has to take it upon herself to go out there and save her father, find those missing girls, and finally put this whole thing to bed so her family can find peace. That premise, to me, sounds like an adult premise, but we're going with YA for this age group, so I'm excited to see how the differences will be with an adult mystery, which has the same kind of premise, which I've read before, with this new YA mystery with the same kind of premise. I want to see the differences. Not to mention, I think some part of me loves to read about, finding missing people. A lot of my favorite mystery horror thrillers come from let's find this missing person. And I'm not sure where that started, but it is a theme. Alright, the last book that I want to talk about comes out on April 27th. It's actually very exciting. It seems something that just, it's like pouring chocolate on my soul. Okay. Meet Me in Another Life by Catriona Silvey. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that first name correctly. If I'm not, obviously, please correct me. So this is an adult contemporary fantasy, possibly romance, it seems like. Thora and Santi are destined to meet all their lives, in every one of their lives, like satellites that orbit each other. Sometimes they are student and teacher, sometimes they're lovers, sometimes they're friends, but they're always destined to be together. Once patterns start forming and memories of past lives start coming back, both of them have to figure out the truth of why they're actually connected before their whole lives spin out of control and they never reincarnate again, it seems like. And that is like probably the best premise I've heard in a long time. I'm sure it's not as entirely unique as I'm feeling it is, but it also feels very sweet and sentimental, and I love this idea that a love can be so strong that it transcends lifetimes. Even if it's not like a passionate or romantic love, loving someone and that love can just continue on. That's such a beautiful idea, and I'm very excited to see it come to life. I hope it does well. 8 books. 8 books I'm excited about in April. 1 mood for April. That's it. That's the video. I hope you enjoyed. I hope I told you about some books maybe you're excited for. What are you excited for that you wanted to tell me about? Let me know down in the comments, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye!